I'm so excited today to have Crystal Washington joining us today. Crystal, I've been wanting to speak to you on my podcast forever. You just spout and share the most wonderful insights and wisdoms all over the place.
Well, thank you, Angela. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you've made me grow so much just by, when I talk about the onlys, I see like leadership, but leadership isn't always in a title. It is in the way that you are and the way that you're being. And so being your Facebook friend, just seeing your daily interactions, you've been traveling so much on your keynote speaking journey. So today I really wanted to stop and really get a chance to get to know you as an only.
Oh, well, let's do it.
Well, so let's start with, what does the power of the only mean to you?
Ooh, the power of the only. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And so I'll give my personal interpretation, but my interpretation may not be everyone else's. When I think about what my power has been, as even when I was younger, sometimes I'd be the only African American in like my AP classes in school, right? Or I'd be the only girl in an engineering competition in school, right?
Yeah.
The power has been in the fact that oftentimes when you're in that position, you are underestimated. You are invisible until you're not. And so I love the fact that I can, and I'm also a very small woman too. So I'm 5'1", I'm child size. So I can be in spaces and people just kind of look over me until I open my mouth or until I turn in the work or whatever else. And so I think that's a competitive, it's a competitive advantage to be able to go in a space, be underestimated, and completely rock the house. So people don't look at it that way. Sometimes our other onlys are like, oh, why can't I be seen? Love it. Because again, if you perform even at level, it seems above level because you were invisible. But normally we're going to bring it anyways because we've had to. So it's kind of a unique little superpower we have there.
And it's so interesting that you say your stature is small, because I always imagine you big. We haven't met in person, but just by the way that you share and you carry yourself. So I can't wait till that day when we actually meet. But the things that you have done are big, right? So I don't think that it's also being underestimated. Where do you think that came from? That being able to claim that power of the only?
Well, I think a good portion of it just came from my family, and I'd say the largest portion comes from my family. I come from a really interesting heritage of people who historically, some of my family members founded part of this country, the United States, right? So I come from people with grit. I come from a tough stock of women. And when I say tough, it's not even like traditionally what you think of as tough. My grandmother, who had a hand at raising me, personality wise, she was actually a lot like Mr. Rogers. She was very soft spoken. But she was also like a Jedi master. Like she could just, with her little soft voice, oh, if you could just do this, it would, and I see this in you. And then like you just did it because there was something about her, you wanted to make her happy. So you had that. And then I had very assertive women, ancestors and family members as well. So I think when you grow up in an environment like that, and I'll also say, this is going to sound like a strange thing to say, but part of my upbringing was the fact that my family, I've heard repeatedly, again, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm going to say it. I've been told repeatedly, oh, your whole family's nice looking. You're a nice looking bunch. So when you're a little girl in that environment, you get no points for being cute. No one cares, right? So the only way you get recognized in my family is by being intelligent or being kind or being industrious. So I think that was a big piece of it. The other part of the boldness and being able to accomplish things came from some of the adversities that I went through starting as a child, from bullying to some dysfunctional stuff in the home, to me sticking up for other people and children. And so it made me bold. It's almost like how, and I don't advocate for this at all, how some people train dogs to be mean. They do things to dogs to make them snap. In that same unfortunate way, some of those things were kind of done to me. And so it makes you bold, right? And so I think the combination of environment with my family kind of produced who I am now.
Well, and I love that you are of awareness of seeing that, because not everyone sees how they're shaped, right? And I think that that's what makes you unique. All of us have challenges, some of them more than others. And it's not always easy to turn those challenges into the strength. And that what is why I see the power of the only in you is that you're able to turn our challenges. Doesn't mean nothing happened. Doesn't mean you don't face hardship. Doesn't mean we're not confident some days, but you were able to turn those challenges into something bigger. And I think that that's what that's given you that perspective, right? A way of seeing things differently. What was there a moment that you want to share in your childhood where something shifted from you? Like, did you always feel like an only, and then it shifted from maybe a weakness to a strength?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, because when I was young, I grew up in very, very young. I grew up in an economically depressed Black city
Mm.
where, so it was very normal for me as an African American. When in my earliest years, all the doctors I knew were Black. All the lawyers I knew were Black, the landlord's Black, the mayor Black.
Okay.
And so, and as a child, I moved into an area that was very diverse in Houston, Texas. I actually ended up going in this school district to the most diverse high school in the United States of America.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's, I think, being rooted in a place where I wasn't an only and then moving someplace else gave me a certain level of confidence. So I never looked at myself as odd. I was me. And then moving into a really diverse area, I remember my first best friend in Houston was a little girl whose family was from Hong Kong, and she was first generation. Her name was Annie, right?
Mhm.
So when you're around that type of diversity, again, no one's strange. It wasn't until much later where I ended up in environments where there were no people of color, or sometimes there were no people of color, no women. So I think being rooted and not
Mm.
being an other helped me when I was an other or an only.
Fascinating. Yeah, that you always had confidence in yourself. It didn't matter. It was like you were surrounded and had that support foundation. So, what was it like when you went into those environments where you became the other? What were some of the challenges that you faced?
I think probably some of the biggest challenges were people's perceptions of who I was versus who I actually was. Thinking not to expect much from me because, Black girl or Black person or woman or girl, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, in track, I would outrun the boys. And so in class, I would have the highest grades of anybody. So it was that. I remember, I think one of the funniest examples was at one point I ended up moving to Atlanta for a short stint of time,
Mm.
and I was in their minority to majority program because the schools near me were hot garbage. There's no other way to put it. They were terrible.
Oh,
And so I was bused to a school where I think there were maybe, I don't think there was 10 Black kids in that whole school. There was one girl who was from, I believe she was from Korea, and there was one Jewish girl. So that was all the diversity in this whole school. And some of my classmates had never even spoken to a Black person before me. And so it was interesting in that environment because I had one teacher who absolutely hated me, and she made
oh
it known
no.
she didn't like me. But I made perfect A's in all of her class and all extra credit. Encountering students, I remember one student came up to me and said, you don't talk like the rest of them. And I said, the rest of who?
Oh my
He's like,
goodness.
And another one was like,
Wow.
he was like, do you have any children? And I'm like, I'm 14. Do you have any children? It's like, no, my mom would kill me. I was like, so does mine. Another one's like, how do you have this accent? I was like, what accent? You sound like you're from TV. I said, because my whole family sounds like this. I don't know. So, so I've had some interesting experience of sure. And even in corporate America, things like that happen. But for me, I wasn't normally offended. I was honestly normally tickled because it was so bizarre. And so I would actually answer them in ways that were sarcastic that they didn't realize. So I'd give an honest answer, but I was amusing myself. So a lot of times, I'll find ways to amuse myself so I don't get annoyed.
Well, what I found fascinating about you when we connected is that you ways that you share, like you're one of the top 50 futurists. You talk about tech and social media. I mean, that's what people hire you for a keynote speaker. But what I am drawn to you about is the way that you manage conversations, the way that you're able to create conversations, to think differently, and to bridge the gap. I see the onlys as being bridge builders, and I see you as one of those bridge builders. We were in conversations online where the way that you navigate seeing other people's perspectives while still honoring your own and owning your voice and your power is so powerful. So I just wanted to get deeper into that. Like, how can people harness that skill, right? Of being in those situations where it's obviously offensive or not, and not move into that territory where you don't move something forward. I have always found that because of your background, the way that you're able to navigate, you still get your point across. You don't shrink down, but it does it in a way that actually moves something forward. What advice do you have for people to navigate that?
Oh, so I'm happy to share. I just want to be very clear in this because I want to make sure no one listening thinks, and you, the way you worded it was wonderful. I want to make sure that no one thinks that I am suggesting that every conversation ends happily. If someone
Yes.
says something just
Oh,
ridiculous,
yeah.
horrible, or attacks you, I
Yes,
believe everyone has the right to defend themselves.
of
But
course.
sometimes people are just a little ignorant, and we can actually address it and like you said, move the conversation forward. I think one of the things is, first thing that I find myself doing is I actually have to kind of pause my ego for a minute. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
wait, that was offensive, but hold on, Crystal,
Yes.
pause for a moment, because I'm naturally very aggressive.
Mm,
And like I said, it was that training as a kid, right? I learned to stick up for myself. I'm naturally
yeah.
very aggressive. And my aggression doesn't look how most, like, I'm not going to yell. That's not my aggression, but
Yeah.
I can attack with words if I want to. So I catch myself first. Whoa, Crystal. And then I
Let's
realize,
pull back.
1 second,
The big picture. Yeah.
breathe out. What do you want to accomplish here? Like you said, moving
Yes.
forward. And then I sit in the fact that we live very different experiences. Um, Especially, let's look at the United States, just because it would be too much for us to try to look at a worldview right now.
Yeah.
People don't realize the United States, we have completely different existences. I
Mm,
grew up, at one point, I lived in an area where it was all Black and Latino gangs. And I remember going to middle school where there were shootings.
yeah.
Their lives were very different than the extremely wealthy children that I went to school with in Atlanta who had never spoken to Black people before. Their lives were very different than Annie and her parents, who were immigrants, right, from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, oftentimes we get lost in the fact that we think just because we all have access to TVs and because we all have the same Pledge of Allegiance and basic laws, that we live
Yes.
the same. And we do not. Our lives are very different. Our realities are very different. So when I ground myself in that, and then I start to figure out, okay, what might this person's reality be, without projecting too much. But sometimes I'll even go and look on their Facebook profiles to kind of see a few things, to get a point of reference.
You're so
Then I
funny. I do that too. It's like a curiosity thing of like, I can try to figure this person out and how I want to address them by knowing what their experience is, what their
yeah,
thought process is, right? Not
yeah.
not spying on it, but just more just what I'm curious, what shaped this person. I love that.
What are their values? So, for
Yeah.
instance, if you see that they're posting a lot of scriptures from the Bible or from the Quran, boom, okay,
Yeah.
I can give examples based on that. If I
Yes.
see that, they subscribe to the church, the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which is a thing, which is, yeah, whatever. I can bring in some, the reference of that, and it's a long story exactly what that is. But my point is that understanding, at least giving you a point of reference to the person,
Yes.
you then know how to communicate in a way that they'll understand. The other thing is I have a dual thing going on. So one, once I suppress my ego, there's two things I'm looking at. One, the experience of the person who I'm communicating with, who may or may not have been offensive, and all the other people reading. So, like, if I see someone be disrespectful to someone else on the post, and disrespectful doesn't mean questioning, it means, we know when someone's attacking
Yeah.
someone, right?
Yeah.
I will check someone and put them in their place very quickly, and not in
Yes.
a mean way, but let them know, just
That's
so
not
that we're
okay.
clear, we're not doing this, because I need people to feel safe in this space. And
Yes.
there's been a few times where people keep going, and I block them, and I let everybody else know why they're blocked. We appreciated this. We can't do this. So I think it's setting standards too. But when you look at everyone's experience and just trying to find those commonalities, you can open people up. There have been people who have wrote some things that were pretty offensive, honestly, on some of my
Yeah.
posts, that now they are so much more open, and when we have conversations, I know where they're coming from. One person sent me a gift the other week because they saw I needed something. And they just sent me on Amazon. I was like, oh my gosh. So,
Wonderful.
it's all about having perspective, I think.
Well, and thank you for sharing that insight because it's such a powerful and important skill to have as we move forward. And not everyone has the time and the capacity right now. So I'm not saying that everyone has to do this all the time, but I really
Right.
did find that moving forward, all of us need to be able to have different perspectives from another person's point of view so that we can communicate effectively. And like you said, doesn't mean accepting someone's offense, or doesn't mean not honoring what you want and not standing up for yourself, but really saying what is the end goal here, or what is this person trying to do? And sometimes it's not worth your time. I'm not saying for everything, but I'm just saying, and for those instances, maybe at work or for someone that you love or someone you care about, that maybe there's a situation where you feel like the only and you're being othered or something's not working. I see you, the onlys, people, because we've been through things, right? You've seen things from different perspective, that you add so much value. So thank you for sharing that insight. That goes to one of the principles of the power of the only. I laid out like 5 power of the only principles, and this podcast was a really way to expand upon them, see if other people shared them. One of them is to see being the only as an opportunity and not a burden. Because I know that sometimes it can be a burden, but I know that you are someone that sees it as an opportunity, also taking that opportunity to, you don't have to post all those things. You don't have to go the extra mile and shift people's perspectives and share your insight in the conversation. It takes a lot of emotional time. And I know that you put your soul into it, but it makes an impact. So how can people see it as more of an opportunity and not a burden?
So I think part of it's perspective. And so in my family, I guess that'd be what's called a griot, which is basically the keeper of history. Okay.
Oh.
And so I traced our family history back hundreds of years, and I have all kinds of stories. And I don't think you can see it here, but I'll angle us here. Is this going to be video as well as audio?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to angle us here so you can see. Oh, mic in the way. We're going to do this because it's kind of important. Do you see this doll over here?
Yes. And for those of you listening, there's a beautiful doll in a white dress.
Okay, so that's Mary Constance. That is my G5 grandmother, okay,
Wow.
who lived in New Orleans, born in the late 1700s, was mixed, very, very wealthy. And some of her descendants actually established schools for the Black people that were being released from slavery. So she was never actually in slavery. So a large portion of my family, it's kind of interesting. I didn't know they had interracial relationships and stuff in the 1700s, but they did. So I say all this to say, I know so many family stories I've traced. I have all this art. There's books under Mary Constance. And so I'm grounded in my history. So I think it's really important to know who you are.
Yes.
Because when you know who you are, people can't shake you. I remember having a conversation with a wonderful woman. She's a wonderful woman a few years ago. And she was talking about how her family was from New Orleans. And this goes to the assumptions, right? Because this is a woman who, she's not Caucasian, but she presents as Caucasian. She's actually Jewish. And so, she made the comment, oh, my ancestors are from there, and yours were too. She made some type of comment about her ancestors being there before my ancestors were there. Something like, it was just something like, we prepared this for you or something. And I said, well, when did your ancestors come over, in the 1880s? And she said, well, yes. How did you know? I said, well, that's when most of the immigrants came. I said, mine settled it. They were on the boat. It settled it in 1818. Now, anyone listening might think, are you having a pee-pee contest with her, Crystal? Absolutely not. But it's a grounding, if that makes sense. That's actually an important fact to understand. No, I am American. I have been here. I'm part of this.
Yes.
So I think that. And then also I think having a global perspective, because Angela, you might be an only in some groups, but globally, you are you're part of a global majority.
Yes.
Not a minority. Same thing as me.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to realize, we have to be able to pull from our history and different perspectives to understand who we are. We are different people based on our situation, or we're categorized differently. There's places where I'm at in the world where I'm not Black anymore. That's not a term that applies to me in some other countries. African-American means something very different in other places, right? And same for you, there's different titles you wear. So I think, to be secure in a space where you are an only, you have to understand that you're not just an only. And the people that might be treating you like you're an only, and I'm not saying it's necessarily negative, right?
Yeah.
There are spaces where you are majority, where they are the only, right? And so understanding that, and then also understanding you have so many competitive advantages. One of them is that you're used to that. If that is your reality frequently, that means that you are able to bend and morph and change because you've had to, right? and you see things that other people don't.
Yes.
And so you can give them perspective and insights that they can't see because they haven't had to.
Yes, that is exactly what the power of the only is about, and why I brought you on is like honoring our past so we can move forward in the future. And the onlys recognizing so much power, right? So much power in the things that you've gone through, the things that you've seen, the time that you spent to dig into that history, to own all of it and to bring it to the forefront, because I think that's valuable for everyone, not just the onlys, but for all of us moving forward, to be able to have these conversations, to see things from different perspectives, to own your past so you can move into the future, and to stand in all of your onlyness or your fullness, right? That there's
Mhm.
power in that. Thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah.
Um, One of the other things that was drawn, one time we talked about, we'll also talk about that we should see it as an opportunity, not a burden. But there's also a time when owning our power and owning our voice is knowing our boundaries, right?
Mhm.
When there is a time when we're pushed beyond a limit, or that it's not always stand up, break the barriers, be the top, go for your goals. And we were talking about a lot of, self-help, a lot of podcasts, a lot of inspiration. There's some reality to that. So I wanted you to share your experience that you had shared online about when you had to walk away, when sometimes it is a burden and you choose yourself.
Well, I think that there are so many ways to be successful. So
Yeah.
like, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say next, not in criticism of anyone else. I'm sharing my perspective, but
Yes.
another perspective might work better for someone else. But I believe that, when you talk about glass ceilings, all right, you hit a glass ceiling, you can't go any higher within that organization. You figure out how to be their competitor, how to become their consultant. You figure out another way around it. Don't keep bumping your head against that.
Yeah.
Go around it. There's another way. So, the story you're talking about, I believe, is one when I was in corporate America. I was in corporate America, this was not right out of college, but not long after college. I'm in my early 20s. I'm managing a department of people that are old enough to be my parents and grandparents. Like I wouldn't actually tell them my real age because I knew they'd eat me for dinner if they knew what my real age. So like when they asked me what my age, like, when I first started out, baby face, they're like, how old are you? I said, how old do you think I am? And I said,
Yeah.
well, for you to be in this position, you have to be at least 30. You just look so young. And I said, close enough. Because I don't believe
Yeah,
in lying.
sure.
I don't believe in lying, but I'm not going to volunteer information that's going to
Yeah.
work with me. So here I am over this department. And there was so much stuff I was dealing with. One of my bosses would make inappropriate advances to me when we were way on sales meetings,
Sorry.
calling my room at midnight one time, which was amazing because I'd gotten the nickname PC because whenever they would say things that were racist or bigoted in meetings, I live in Texas, I would say that's inappropriate. And so I got they start nicknaming me PC. So imagine my boss's surprise when he called me at midnight and I cursed him out because I was shocked, but then I was angry. So I'm dealing with
Yeah.
that. I'm dealing with some other issues. There's racism stuff. I had emails of all kinds of crazy stuff people were saying about other groups of people, which means they'll say crazy stuff about me too when I'm not in the room.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stuff going on. This one day in particular, I walk into the office in the morning and one of the Latina assistants is in tears. And I go up to her and I'm like, what's wrong? Now, mind you, she's not my assistant, but I
Yeah.
trained her because her managers, I was the only Black manager, her managers didn't want anything to, they just kept piling work on her, didn't actually train her. So I trained this woman who didn't work for me. So I'm
Okay.
like, what's wrong? And she told me she had overheard a conversation between another manager and my boss, and they were making a really racist comment about me. And she was just so shocked. And
Mm.
I was young. I was like 23, but she was really
Yeah.
young. So she was just kind of, over it. And I just told her, I said, I said, look, I said, sweetheart, it's fine. I said, I'm good. But now you know who you work for. But I appreciate you.
Yeah.
You don't have to be upset for me. And it's like I literally heard a voice that said it's time to go and don't take anything
Yeah.
with you. And I was
Wow.
like, first off, do I need medicine? I'm not in the habit of hearing voices. Right? So that was scary. And then I was like, okay, like I had this peace that came over me and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So I went to HR. I told them I was leaving and they tried to convince me to stay. I said no. I went to my department. I opened up my desks and I told, my ladies, everybody who worked for me happened to be a woman. I said, hey, everybody, it's my last day. I'm about to go right now. Y'all can take anything you want. I love you. I appreciate you. Peace out. And I
They're
walked
like,
in.
what? Everyone's probably buzzing, right? They're like, wait, what's
Yeah,
going on?
literally all this activity behind me. And I'll never forget it. It was October 17th, 2007. So it was fall. And I remember walking outside, it was sunny and there's this like great breeze. And I'm in a 3-piece black suit. And I started twirling. Literally, I was twirling in the sun. But it was the best decision I ever made because it allowed me to launch my marketing business, which launched my speaking business.
Yes.
And so I think there comes a point where, there's nothing wrong with staying and fighting if that is what you are led to do. But sometimes we're not led to do that. Sometimes, in my case, a very literal voice, is like, time to go, don't take anything with you. All right.
Yes.
So, that's my perspective, maybe not everybody's, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring that up, I remember there was one quote I think you had in there. It's like sometimes, you choose yourself and your boundaries and you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. And it doesn't always have to have the plan, but it's like you said, you make that decision. And the reason I want to do that is because we hear all these stories of like, oh no, just fight through or do this. And I really think it's time to change the narrative that sometimes things don't turn out exactly the way we want them. But if we get the call, and just like you said, doesn't mean you shouldn't. There's some people who are saving for pensions. They have a family to feed. They have to go through the motions. They have to do what's right for them. But at some point, I want to see that statement of seeing it as an opportunity, not a burden. But when it does become a huge burden, it's like when you've done the steps, right? You know who you are. You've done the work. And it's just like, you know what? It is time to create a shift and to choose me. And the reason I was drawn to that is I have a similar story. My background's in TV news and I was in a small market. I was the news anchor there. And I remember I had run out of money because I'd worked in Hollywood, saved up money, went to a small market. I was like I was the noon anchor. I had my own show. It was doing well. My contract was up and all they had to do was just renew it or not renew it, let me stay until I get to a bigger market. But they said, no, 4 years or nothing. You have to stay here for another 4 years or you're fired. And I think I made like $23,000 a year. I was like, I've already been here for 2 years. I have really high ratings. I can't stay for another 4 years. And because another station was about to hire me, whether San Diego or San Francisco, but it just wasn't the right time. And I remember feeling so defeated. And they were basically trying to bully me to keep me into staying and to not, he's like, no raise, just 4 years or nothing. Wow. And I called my agent and they said, oh, there's nothing we can do. They want you, but they may not want you right now. So you're just going to have to figure out what they want. I said, no, I'm not doing this. And so behind the scenes, I got an interview in Los Angeles. That's how I ended up in Los Angeles. But in front, I remember I got myself to Los Angeles, even though there was nothing available according to my agent. And I got myself an interview and I got myself a job in Los Angeles, which I thought was 5 years down the line. I had no idea I was going to make it back to my hometown. I was in Bakersfield. I thought maybe I'd stop in San Diego. So that kind of threat pushed me to get something good. But I remember that day, and this is what struck me. I walked into the office and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't gloat that I got a job in LA. That would have been like, everyone would be like, yay. I was like, because what if they fired me the next day? It was a freelance job. I literally walked in there and I told everyone I'm leaving tomorrow. My contract's up in 2 days. I'm leaving tomorrow. After the show, I'm packing up my bags and I'm leaving. They're like, what? Wait, what? I thought you could work it out. And I walked in the office and I said, thank you for the offer, but I'm not going to accept it. You're kind of bullying me into a situation. No. Okay. 1 year. Okay. 2 years. And I said, no, thank you very much. So what are you going to do? You're going to be out on the street. You don't have a job. What are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to trust in me. And thank you very much. And I packed up my stuff and I walked out. And I ended up in Los Angeles. It doesn't always turn out that way though, but there's that moments in life where we choose ourselves, right? Doesn't mean you don't go for it. Doesn't mean you don't make things work. But I wanted to share that story because I think there's some people who feel like, listening to my inspirational podcast about breaking through your barriers, there are moments where you have to choose for yourself. So thank you for taking a stand for that.
Yeah.
But now I want to talk about how amazing you are just now. Tell me some of the things that you're working on. You've been traveling so much as a keynote speaker, doing virtual as well as in person. How has it been on the road and what are some of the topics that you're talking about?
Oh, wow. It's been hectic, to say the least. I don't think I've traveled this much ever in my life for speaking. But I find that the two biggest topics that keep coming up, one is the future of work, because I'm a futurist and everybody wants to know what's coming next. And the other one are my technology talks for more sales and marketing. So people are trying to figure out, I have a talk that's like relationship 2.0, how to build relationships in this digital world. And so I'm telling them how to use tools to build better relationships, even when you can't see people in person. So it's been
Right.
a lot of fun, because the interesting thing about speaking to people right now is that
Mm,
many people are traumatized. We've
yeah.
gone, really, as the world, but I'll stick with this country because I'm more informed on this. We've gone through a collective trauma over the
Yeah.
last 19 months, and many of us haven't dealt with it, or still dealing with it in different places. So there's this hunger in people, there's this anxiety, there's this thing that I can't quite name yet, but I get a chance to help people release that, because I make a lot of jokes. And even though I'm teaching people things in my presentations, I kind of take almost a stand-up comedian approach to how I do
Mhm.
some things. And so seeing people laugh and release that stress, and
Yeah.
have a better understanding of what's coming, and empowering them to shape the future. Because I teach people, you don't have to just accept, like, the future. We're not victims of the future. The future leaves Easter eggs. So I show them how to recognize those. And not only that, you can actually reach into the future, the one that you want, and pull it back towards you. So I share with them, like, how
Wow.
can you shape it? So that's what I've been up to. Just sometimes I'm doing as much as 3 cities a week. So it's a lot, but it's exciting, and it's just interesting to see where people are now, all different walks of life.
And I love that you're out there. You're speaking at some very large events, large venues, great companies, and you're not going out there as an only. You're going out there because you have the credibility and you
Mhm.
have a message and something to say. What are some of the audiences like? You speak to all audiences, right?
And what's funny, I mean, when you talk about, even in any other time, I speak to all kinds of audiences. Now it's rare that I get to speak to groups of all women, although sometimes I get those, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's rare that I get to speak to groups where it's mostly Black and brown people. That happens not even annually, but once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, but people are people. I think one of the
Yes.
funniest examples was, I remember speaking at an event before where it was farmers. And these were Southern farmers. And when I tell you, and I'm not a big fan of stereotypes, but some of them actually were wearing our overalls, like,
Yeah.
for real. And
It's who they
black,
were. Yeah. It's what they're
yeah,
wearing. Yeah.
like because these were small farmers. For anyone who doesn't know, our image of what farming is about 100 years off, but there are
Yeah.
small farmers that kind of
Yes.
fit the bill. And I just, here I am. And before I go up, I hear them talking, and they're talking about their Christian values, and God bless, President Trump. And so this isn't the normal group you'd expect
Yeah.
to see to bring me in, honestly. And by the end, it was so cute. The organizer was hugging me. He's like, "Oh, this is my friend Crystal. My friend Crystal. Y'all gonna love Crystal. Crystal, can you stay over for lunch with us?" And so I'm just hanging
I
out with
love
them. And
that.
no one looked anything like me. In fact, there was only one woman there, period. Right. But, people are people. At the end
Yes.
of the day, people are people.
And that's what I want to get to with the power of the only is that, I'm not a woman speaker, I'm a speaker. And what do I bring to the table? What do I give? What value do I give to this audience? And my onlyness, my Asianness, my womanness comes through,
Mhm.
but that's not why I'm there. Right.
Right.
You're there because you're there and you own the space and you own your power. That's where I want to get to. That's where I want every listener to get to is that you walk into that room, you own that space because of you. And that doesn't mean hiding parts of you. That doesn't mean your ethnicity and all those things don't come into play. It's just not the reason why, but it
Mhm.
is all part of you. And when we honor our past, like you said, and honor our history and honor who we are, it comes out naturally. How
Mhm.
can other people think, what are three top ways that you think that people can harness that power of the only?
So one, you hit on one that I say all the time, and I'd love to dig a little deeper. One is own your space. So when you
Yeah.
show up in a place, we're often taught, and I think this is through childhood, that we're supposed to adapt to the
Yeah.
space. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you show up as your whole full self,
Yes.
but you might translate yourself to the others. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So instead of changing who you are, you show up as who you are. So for instance, there's certain idioms I use as part of Black culture. And so I might make a comment and someone's like, "That sounds hilarious. What does that mean?" Well, what it means is, and I will translate in a way that they understand. But
Yeah.
I'm not changing who I am. I don't have to dress a different way or pretend that I don't like hip hop or whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
right? Or pretend that I don't like, playing the French horn, whatever, like, whatever. But my point is, show up as your whole self, and people feel comfortable with you when you show up as who you are. Like, I'll
Yeah.
show up places with my head wrapped and stuff like that. people aren't looking like me, but people are attracted to authenticity.
Yes.
They feel comfortable. So I think number one, own your space. Number two, know what you know. So if you know your stuff, like Angela, you talked about the fact that you are not, an Asian American speaker. You're not a woman speaker. You're a speaker. You're on par with any other speaker. Now, extra added bonus is you are these things. And so you're going to have a unique perspective. That's the cherry on top. But I love the fact you say that, because I've had other Black speakers tell me, oh, well, you should send out materials for, February programs for events. And I'm like, February? They're like, yeah, Black History Month.
Black History
I said, I'm not a Black History Month speaker.
Yeah.
I'm a futurist. Most of my peers are white men. I don't want them to call me every time, they pull out with the Black program and it's me and Harriet Tubman projected behind me. And I love Harriet Tubman, but that's not what I do.
Yeah.
So, that, and I think maybe the last piece is just, again, ground yourself in your history.
Yes.
I know it's something that's downplayed so much right now, but I think knowing what is true is so important. And then how that applies to you, because no matter where you come from, no matter what your story is, there's something you can ground yourself in if you're an only, that gives you some insights into who you are. And if you happen to be a so-called minority in the United States, I guarantee you, your ancestors are some of the baddest people who have ever lived. Some of the stuff that they went through. And I'm not saying this in terms of like suffering, worshiping suffering. I don't mean that. I mean, they made a way, if they immigrated, or like some of my ancestors, if they were kidnapped. These are some tough people. And these are the people you come from, right? So I think knowing that, the fact that I know what Mary Constance went through, and she had a heck of a life, even though she was technically like a millionaire at the time, she went through some horrible things due to racism when the United States purchased Louisiana and Louisiana purchased. So if she can go with if she can get through that, the little stuff I go through now. I remember when COVID first hit and I did like all these videos trying to figure out the technology, how to do it.
I bought all new equipment and all new things.
I remember looking at her and thinking, I can't complain about nothing. I was just like, nope. I have other ancestors listed over here too, like pictures of them. So I think that history grounding is something that's not talked about very often. But I think no matter what your background is, it is so incredibly important. And if you happen to not know your family history, or if you happen to be adopted, just finding out what you can about your people as a greater, people is so important.
And I love what you said about honoring the past and honoring the suffering, but not bringing it forward. That's not what your ancestors are known for, even though they may have gone through challenges or obstacles, is that what you bring forward is their strength. Right. Yeah. It's like, what can we highlight from that? That is what they've given me. That is the gift that they've given me. And what am I going to do with it? Even though I don't have to go through the exact same things that they go through again. And I also wanted to go back to your first comment about taking up space. There's one episode, which I'll put in the show notes. It was with Tony Chapman, and we talked about code switching. And that horrible word, code switching, but I always found it as strength. I don't call it code switching. I call it understanding my audience. I never shrink down. And I don't think all people think this way. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I wanted an example of someone where you don't shift, you don't change, but that doesn't mean you stand so strongly and firmly. This is who I am. And this is what I think. It's more like, no, I don't back down on who I am. I show up fully as who I am. And by being in that space, I get to change the space. I get to influence the space. And I also get to hear, and I do accommodate to certain situations, not because I'm changing who I am, but because I'm honoring the audience, right? Like you said, about looking deeper into how are people thinking? How am I going to communicate with this person by understanding the other side? I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I don't call it code switching, but I don't always think that, understanding and shifting for environments is a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I probably did more of it when I was younger. But what's interesting is I've come to this place as I'm getting closer to 40, where it's like all those different versions have like converged on this one. Because what's interesting is I didn't have to code switch in exactly the same ways as other people. Culturally, in terms of cultural references, yes, when I was the only. What's funny is the way I talk right now is how my whole family talks. Well, I had to incorporate words into my language so that other Black people that don't talk like me would feel comfortable around me too, right? So
Mhm.
literally it was like a double-sided thing where it
Yes.
was like, oh, okay. And so what happened was over time, the little things that I did, like incorporating the words folks, like, or
Yeah.
that would, or other things that I would do where I would widen my attention and look at other shows or music. And so it kind of converged into what I am now. So I can't say that I never code switch, but I don't think it's very often because I've kind of settled in this middle ground. The
Yeah.
other thing I will say about taking up space is I literally believe in taking up space. So if anyone, for instance, ever runs into me like on a train or something, or even on a plane, if there's a big person that sits next to me and they automatically spread out,
Yeah.
I will automatically spread out to keep my space. Now, if they're really friendly and I see they're suffering over there and they don't have enough space, I'll scoot over because they've been nice to me. But there's no automatic assumption that you get to infringe on my space because I'm smaller. And friends have seen me do this and they think it's hilarious. I will literally sit there, open my just like, guys, sit back. Because it's all the same thing, whether you're talking about the words that come out of your mouth, how people treat you, the space you take up, it is a very
Yes.
literal thing. So literally take up your space and don't apologize for it.
I love that you said that. There's one experiment, I don't know if you've heard people say where for women, like men kind of walk through, they expect the smaller or the other person to go around them. I don't know if you've ever done that experiment where I'm going like, is that true? Because I do own my space. I put it on my shoulders. I don't think there was always that case, but there's a confidence that comes with just over time, right? It's an evolution of stepping into yourself and being who you are. But I'll walk around and I'm all, is that true that a man will make me move, and not necessarily. I think that if you own your energy and own your space, it's not true for every situation, but I've done that where I just own my space. I'm
Mhm.
like, I mean, polite move, but I don't see people charging through me. Just like, right, you sitting in the seat, like you own your space. And so it almost is like an energetic thing too,
Mhm.
right? When you own that space energetically, certain things may not happen the way that you think they would, or other people would say they would, just because of your energy shift.
Yeah, they treat you differently. Again,
Yeah.
I am a 5'1" woman. I'm tiny. I've had elementary school kids when I went to my nephew's elementary school. When they saw me from the back, I've had kids like literally grab me by the arm and say, "Oh, the Play-Doh's over here. Let's go play here." Like literally, I think I'm like one of the kids. This is how small I am. But I can take up space where men that are 6 feet, 6 feet 4 inches are looking down but looking up at me, if that makes any sense. Like they're so respectful as they're viewed
Yeah.
way down. I had a client last week. It was hilarious. We got ready to take a picture. He actually got on his knees so he'd be on my level. Like, and he was just like, I would have never thought
Oh,
you were as little as you are. He's like, but here, let's go ahead and fix this. Like people treat you, and it wasn't condescending. Like
yeah.
people treat you differently. So just own your space. You deserve it. You're here.
Yes. I love that. And that's what I wanted to get you on because you just share all that. What's next for you? What are some of the things that you see and what do you hope for the future as a futurist?
I have some pretty exciting projects ahead, but I'm not really at ease to talk about all of them yet. But I will be expanding some of the thinking we're talking about here in a more technical format to show people how to influence the future. And this is actually a
Mm.
part of it. There's some cultural elements to it. So that's exciting. But other than that, I just look forward to continuing to show people how to harness their intuition, how to
Yes.
harness data, and how to better work with other people to influence the future because we have so much more control than we think we do as
Yeah.
individuals. But it requires a certain amount of bravery because we can't think of a single time in history where there hasn't been someone who sought to change the future in a dramatic way who wasn't attacked. Like I love to give the example of
Yeah.
like Dr. Martin Luther King because now everybody in the United States is like, oh, he was a great man, he was wonderful. He had a 73% disapproval rate when
Yeah.
he was alive. He had the same disapproval rate as Colin Kaepernick when he was kneeling. So just as many people didn't like Martin Luther
Yeah.
King, right? Because you're interrupting people's vision of the future, and that's scary. It destabilizes people. So
Yeah.
I just look forward to empowering people to shape their futures, the future around them, and to be brave because you are going to get some opposition. But as long as you take up your space and just keep moving forward, you'll be fine.
I love that words of wisdom because it's really so much is changing and evolving. And you have to be that one that creates that change and starts with us. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. It's so great to talk to you, Crystal.
Thank
Have
you,
a
Anna.
beautiful day. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing your time with me now that you're in your hometown and not traveling.
Thank you.
Thank you.